All right, guys, so we got some updates here on the Trump administration's full-blown assault on the First Amendment, specifically in regards to anybody who dares to criticize the government of Israel. So here from Bill Malugin of Fox News, he says, breaking, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, announces that they will begin considering aliens, quote, anti-Semitic activity on social media and physical harassment of Jews as grounds to deny immigration benefit requests, including applications for lawful permanent resident status and foreign visa students. They say, per USCIS, the direct quote here is, under this guidance, USCIS will consider social media content that indicates an alien endorsing, espousing, promoting, or supporting anti-Semitic terrorism, anti-Semitic terrorist organizations, or other anti-Semitic activity as a negative factor in any USCIS discretionary analysis when adjudicating immigration benefit requests. And they say this guidance is effective immediately. So first things first, what do they actually mean by anti-Semitism in this context? Well, if you're going by what the Trump administration has said previously, or if you're going by the US government approved IHRA definition, then it explicitly includes criticism of Zionism as a settler colonial project or criticism of the government of Israel, of the state of Israel, right? That's what they're talking about largely when they discuss anti-Semitic activity or support for anti-Semitic terrorist organizations, right? If you dare to go out on your social media platform, not only just attend a protest or to speak out publicly, but even on your social media page, if you dare to like a post that is critical of Israel's genocide in Gaza or critical of their ethnic cleansing, their ongoing settlement expansion in the West Bank, then you are guilty of anti-Semitism, and you will therefore be barred from having a student visa, from having a green card, from being able to essentially exist as a non-citizen in the United States of America. That's what the Trump administration is saying here. Now, Ryan Graham, in response to somebody asking a question here in terms of how far will this actually go, the question here from Ali is this administration just going to deny a visa if some foreign student retweets a New York Times article or posts on Facebook a headline like this? Now, this headline, right, you could view as anti-Israel. The headline is, relentless Israeli attacks on Gaza medical workers are a war crime according to the United Nations, right? Now, this is an objectively true headline, but at the same time, you could view this as an anti-Israel headline, which, again, anti-Israel to the Trump administration means anti-Semitic, okay, which they are deeming completely abhorrent and not acceptable for entrance to the United States of America or existence in the United States of America. So you could view this headline through that lens. And keep in mind, we're talking about the New York Times here, which, if anything, has been subservient to the Israeli government in terms of their coverage here. But as Ryan points out here, yes, presumably, even liking or sharing an article like this from one of the largest media organizations in the United States of America could be grounds for revoking a visa and detaining somebody indefinitely or throwing them out of the country, right? Now, his other post that this person was responding to was an initial response to this DHS guidance on screening immigrant social media activity for anti-Semitism. And he makes an important point here, which is, remember, Republicans do not believe in protecting marginalized communities. They made that a centralized focus of their party apparatus over the last number of years. The anti-wokeness, the anti-racism aspect of their party. In fact, they hate it and they think it's for lefty losers, right? So to be clear, this is about something else, right? In other words, what the Trump administration is expecting us to believe is that the same party that has made the idea of racism within the United States systemically, structurally, or otherwise into a complete joke, the same administration that has played on anti-wokeness, anti-safe spaces for the last number of years, we're now expected to believe that they suddenly really, really care about protecting safe spaces and about protecting a marginalized community, but just this one community that just so happens to coincide with their views on foreign policy in regards to Israel, right? That's what they're expecting us to buy into, which is completely fucking stupid at face value, right? Does anybody really believe that this is about protecting Jewish people? No, of course it's not. If anything, you can make a very strong argument that what the Trump administration is doing, plus what the Biden administration did before, plus what the Israeli government is doing by tying together Jewish identity with the actions of the government of Israel, that is driving anti-Semitism. Because you're essentially saying the actions of this genocidal apartheid government, that is representative of all Jewish people. That's what the Israeli government wants you to believe. And to me, that's actual anti-Semitism, right? Because when I criticize Israel, I'm not criticizing the Jewish people, right? And many of the Jewish people here in the United States have been leading some of the anti-Israel protests in this country, the anti-genocide protests here in the US. So the real anti-Semitism is being driven both by like far-right neo-Nazis here in the US, as well as by the Israeli government and by self-proclaimed Zionists who want to tie these things together in order to deflect away criticism from the state of Israel as being some sort of an anti-Semitic unfair attack, when what they're actually doing is driving anti-Semitism. Now, we continue here, because this comes in the background of, again, a full-blown assault on any criticism of this foreign government, right? You can criticize Germany, you can criticize Japan, you can criticize Brazil, you can criticize Mexico, you can criticize Russia, Ukraine, whatever you want. Just don't criticize Israel, right? You can even criticize the United States of America, but you can't criticize Israel. So the background of this is that the Trump administration, okay, has been not only arresting and trying to deport people who are here legally in this country, right? Not undocumented immigrants. We're talking about people with green cards. In the case of Mahmoud Khalil, we're talking about people who are here on student visas. We're talking about people who are legally. They have been arresting and deporting them for the crime of attending protests or writing op-eds that are critical of Israel. On top of that, we have the Trump administration, aside from immigrants or non-citizens who are here in the US, attacking universities like Columbia University, withholding hundreds of millions of dollars in funds in exchange for demanding that Columbia cracks down on their Middle Eastern studies departments, right? And on top of the Trump administration trying to threaten to withhold hundreds of millions of dollars from Columbia, they've also been getting students expelled, American US citizen students expelled. So even if you don't care, which you should, but even if you don't care about people who are here on green cards or people who are here on student visas or whatever the case may be, this is also directly implicating US citizens, right? That's why I say this is a direct attack on the First Amendment for everybody in this country, for everybody, non-citizen or citizen alike, because there are US-born citizens who are being ejected from their universities. There are professors who are American citizens being ejected from their universities at the order of the Trump administration. He has hijacked, in this case at Columbia, the Middle Eastern Studies Department unilaterally, while again hanging over hundreds of millions of dollars from this university as a leverage point. Now, specifically, I should call out Columbia University because they did not have to go along with this. Specifically, Columbia has roughly like a $14 to $15 billion endowment. So they really could have eaten this $400 million cost. And they could have decided to stand on the side of their students and respect their right to protest, respect their right to stand up against a genocide. Columbia has chosen, as well as many other universities as well, they have chosen not to do that. They have chosen to side with the Trump administration. They've chosen to side previously with the Biden administration and with the NYPD. They have chosen to sell out their students on behalf of both, again, the American administrations, but also on behalf of the government of Israel. And that has been absolutely pathetic and disgusting to watch. Now, we also have an update here on specifically Mahmoud Khalil, who has been one of the leading student pro-Palestine activists here in the US. So we have a new memo here signed by the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who gives an update to make it explicitly clear what exactly Mahmoud Khalil was arrested for and they are attempting to deport him for. So they say here from DropSite News, the memo, which was signed by Marco Rubio, states that while Khalil's activities were, quote, otherwise lawful, no illegal activity being alleged here, they say his presence would undermine, quote, U.S. policy to combat anti-Semitism around the world and in the United States, in addition to efforts to protect Jewish students from harassment and violence in the United States. Now, specifically on this secondary point here, to protect Jewish students from harassment and violence in the United States. Now, at Columbia University, again, as has been the case in many of these protests around the entirety of the country, there were Jewish students who were helping to lead these protests. There are Jewish organizations like Jewish Voices for Peace, and If Not Now, that have been leading some of these protests around the U.S. Specifically at the Columbia protest, they were holding like Seder meals, right? It's not as if this was an anti-Jewish protest in any way, shape, or form. In fact, it was the opposite of that. And Mahmoud Khalil has been explicitly clear that his vision of the future in terms of moving towards peace involves the Jewish people as a critical aspect of that. So the idea that this is about protecting Jewish students from harassment and violence, in the case of Mahmoud Khalil, is a complete fucking lie. It's just a complete fucking lie. Now, again, it's also important to double down here. They're saying nothing that he did was unlawful. He committed no crimes, but specifically that his presence here, by protesting U.S. foreign policy in regards to supporting, funding, giving diplomatic cover for a genocide, is a threat to U.S. foreign policy. That's their claim here. This is explicitly, as clear as you could possibly get, a direct attack on the right to free speech in this country. That's what this is. They're not even really hiding it. They're not even making an attempt to hide it in this instance. Now, they continue. They say, quote, condoning anti-Semitic conduct and disruptive protests in the United States would severely undermine that significant foreign policy objective. They say Judge James Comins had ordered the U.S. government to produce evidence against Mahmoud Khalil ahead of a hearing on Friday to decide whether the U.S. government can continue detaining him during immigration proceedings. They say despite earlier claims by the DHS spokesperson, Tricia McLaughlin, that Khalil's activities aligned to Hamas, the government has not provided any evidence to support this accusation. And of course, the accusation is false and has made no reference to the group in its most recent filing. They say Khalil's attorneys, Mark Van der Hout and Johnny Sinodis, stated, quote, after a month of hiding the ball since Mahmoud's late-night unjust arrest in New York and taking him away to a remote destination or detention center in Louisiana, immigration authorities have finally admitted that they have no case whatsoever against them. There is not a single shred of proof that Mahmoud's presence in America poses any threat. And they say Khalil, in a letter from the jail, has rejected the anti-Semitism accusations, and Jewish students have written to the court in support of his character. Now, we'll finish off with this, right? Here from Glenn Greenwald, in terms of some of the recent polling data here in the United States, to finish off on sort of a bright spot or a glimmer of hope, right? Because we have not only the Trump administration doing a full-blown authoritarian, anti-First Amendment, fascist crackdown on Americans' right to free speech in terms of criticizing Israel, but, as well as undocumented or documented immigrants' right to free speech in this country. On top of that, we also have the full-blown support for now a total ethnic cleansing plan in the Gaza Strip and Israel's ability to continue their ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. The Trump administration has been going balls to the wall, doing everything that they can to be subservient to whatever Israel wants to do. And at the same time that we have that, right, the glimmer of hope here is that even with the overwhelming propaganda from our government, both Democrats and Republicans elected to office, even with the unrelenting influence of AIPAC and Israeli PR, we still have the American people rising above and looking at what's happening on the ground and coming to their own conclusions and rejecting this kind of propaganda. So here's the latest polling data from Pew Research. This is from late March of this year, just a couple weeks ago. So among U.S. adults in totality, Democrat, Republican, Independent alike, in terms of how many people have an unfavorable view of Israel. The movement here, from 2022, it was down at 42%, which is still a pretty high number, again, given the overwhelming, relentless propaganda in favor of Israel. It was still in 2022 at 42% of Americans had an unfavorable view of Israel. Now, in 2025, it's all the way up to 53%. So an outright majority of the American people have an unfavorable view of the government of Israel. In terms of Republicans, especially young Republicans, this is the key number here, ages 18 to 49, that number from 2022 to 2025 has jumped from 35 to 50. So now, in other words, half of Republicans under the age of 49 have a negative view of Israel. Think about that. In terms of Democrats, it's utterly overwhelming. I mean, every age group here, 50 plus even, with elderly Democratic voters. It's gone from 43 to 66%. That's essentially a supermajority of even elderly Republicans, and 71% for younger Republicans that have a negative view of Israel. So I'll leave you guys off with that. It looks like the Trump administration is not going to stop anytime soon. He's going to continue to push the boundaries of what is considered constitutional, what is considered legal, or even if it is unconstitutional and it is illegal, what can he get away with? What will the courts allow him to do? Who's going to actually stop him as he flagrantly violates due process in this country? He flagrantly violates free speech rights in this country. He flagrantly continues to support an ongoing genocide and an ethnic cleansing overseas as he's pushing us closer and closer towards a potential war with Yemen, a potential war with Iran directly. Yet to be seen exactly where this is going to potentially end. But again, the one bright spot here is that even through all of this, the American people overwhelmingly can see through the bullshit.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying